Alright, so Dromai finally won a major. Today, let's take a look at the different Dromai deck lists, because 4 actually made the top, and they were all pretty distinctly different builds, so I want to take a moment to look at the different deck building choices that they made and how they are distinctly different from each other. If you're looking to find these deck lists, by the way, they are on February if you just click on the tournaments tab. Now, first of all, we have the winner, Guy. He was playing kind of a, what I'm gonna dub Big Royal, which is kind of like a big dragon style of Dromai where you are playing the Royal package, kind of like Nick Butcher's list. Second place, we have Matthew Vore, who's playing more of a traditional big dragon build. This is very similar to the one that I took to Nationals, with a couple tech choices that are different for the current metagame that we're looking at, where, you know, there's more of a focus on the mirror now. And then we have Jacob Baugh, Tree Frog Dash aficionado. I was actually really surprised to see him not playing mech at this, who's playing more of a, almost looks like an Empress or Redline Royal style of Dromai, kind of reminiscent of how Mara typically likes to play her lists. And then we have Nicholas, who's playing also kind of a big royal list. Key difference being that he has no secondary helmet and a couple other card choices in here, but we're going to get to that in a second. Now, I want to first talk about the big dragon list, since this is kind of the one that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb amidst the rest of these deck lists. This is the only one like this. We're not playing royal at all in this list. We're playing the double helmet. This is definitely for Lexi, so that way you can have some extra block value in that matchup. And we're playing the Ghostly Touch Time Skipper package, since we don't have the gold to get ahead on Ash. We got Contraband to get some edge in the mirror. We've got Pursuit of Knowledge to get some edge in the mirror. These hit triggers really important here, kind of making up for not having Snatch in the list, which is a choice that was, as you can see, made here. And then we're going with Flicker Trick as well as the other D-Reacts to get some more edge into Lexi. This list looks like it was definitely metagamed to target Lexi, and then have a really solid fatigue plan into Bravo, and then we used some of our other card slots in the deck to get some extra equity in the mirror, since we don't have Tome. Important to note, no sand cover. We're just playing Oasis, which could be a problem if you run into like an Azalea or an Icelander or something, but I think it's fine with this blue count and with how defensive this deck is. I do think Contraband and Pursuit was a really heads-up choice for this event. You're definitely going to see Dromai all over the place, and Pursuit almost does like an imitation of what Tome allows you to do. A lot of the power in Tome is in the velocity in which you're able to create board, because realistically all Tome is doing is being a cosplay blue that makes 2 Ash, but normally you don't want to pitch blues in Dromai because it messes up your Ash economy. So when you're able to actually pitch a blue because you're like really ahead on Ash and deploy a lot of dragons, the math on what you're doing goes through the roof of how much value you're getting, but also how much you're snowballing the board and your opponent's ability to actually deal with it, which is a massive thing in the mirror, which is like one of the big reasons why everyone's playing Royal. It's so good in the mirror. Pursuit kind of has an imitation effect of that, where, well, while we don't have the ability to cosplay a blue and play multiple threats in one turn off of a single pitch, the Pursuit gives us that extra card, so we can come in with like a 6-card hand, and it's almost the same. We do just need to worry about our Ash economy in that scenario. This list is also pretty lean on attack action cards. We got no Rabble, no E-Strike, no Snatch. I think Snatch could have been an interesting choice in this list to get some more equity in the mirror, but I can understand not playing it. The Contrabands is kind of filling that slot, and it's kind of hard finding cuts to add in even more attack action cards. You're kind of sacrificing something if you do that. It would probably end up being like over the Flicker Trick or something like that, and kind of want that extra equity against Lexi. It's the most popular deck in the game right now. But I think this list is pretty solid. This is kind of similar to what I was looking at if I was planning on playing a big dragon version of the deck. I personally wasn't on Pursuit. I've never been a big fan of that card, but I think that definitely makes sense for the room that this was being brought into. Now, if you guys are interested in Big Dragon, also feel free to check out my Patreon. I have a matchup guide on there of how to play every single matchup in the game as Big Dromai. Now, moving on to the other lists, we have Jacob Baugh's next. He had a couple interesting choices in here. So again, we're going with the double helmet. I'm assuming this is also for Lexi, and we're just not playing Royal in that matchup. That's like a really interesting choice that I think a lot of Dromai players are struggling with, whether or not it's correct to be Royal in that matchup versus just having the extra block value. The tomes can end up being a liability in that matchup since they don't block, and you can just get in these weird endgame scenarios where you're like, I have to block this turn, but if I block with everything but the tome, this hand does nothing. Like, tome literally does nothing by itself. So it's a weird tug and pull on the power level of that card, whether or not it's correct to play in that matchup, especially if you see them late in the game. Another interesting choice, definitely for the mirror as well. We're playing Silken Form over Arcane Barrier. This is something that I actually did at Nationals 2 with my Dromai list. I didn't think there's going to be that much arcane damage floating around. It was like just Rune Blades, which wasn't very popular at the moment, and Icelander was a deck that going into that wasn't solved, so I didn't expect to see very much Icelander. Of course, this is the event that Hamilton ended up coming out with Icelander. Kind of like I was talking about before with the Pursuit. This is like a cosplay Arcane Barrier. You get to do a very similar thing, but importantly in the mirror, it gives you a slight edge where you're able to create the Ashwing and get a head on board earlier in the game. We got Blaze Headlongs in here. We've got Dromai Dust. The Dromai Dust makes a lot of sense since we're not playing the Time Skipper Ghostly Touch package. We need a way to be able to kind of overcome fatigue decks and get over the hump of their poppers and everything, and like kind of have that crazy combo turn where we just like punch them in the face. Other interesting choices in here. We've got the Flame Call engine, which makes total sense while we're playing things like Blaze Headlong and stuff. It's just like more cards to kind of go with these like red line aggro style cards. I'm not a huge fan of this right now, but it helps with your Ash engine, so this can be very good in the mirror where you just have more Ash positive cards and just win on the Ash economy side of the matchup. And it's a card that can go very well with Tome. You can either play this before or after the Tome and just get a lot of value. Like you can open with Tome, play Flame Call off of the resource made off of it, play something else, then pitch the Phoenix Flame into your Furnace to make 3 resources and keep playing cards. Or you can play something else as an opener, play the Flame Call, grab the Phoenix Flame, then play the Tome, pitching the Phoenix Flame into the Tome. There's a lot of different ways to play that just generate a lot of value. We also got the Double Time Snap Potion. This is definitely for fatigue and other matchups, kind of filling a similar role as the Dromai Dusts. In this case, it doesn't mean that we have to draw exactly a Dromai with it. It does a similar impression. Got the Nourishings. I'm not a huge fan of this, but I know this has been a mainstay of the Empress Redline versions of the deck to either get an edge early in the game or close out games later on where you end up banishing all of your attack action cards with your Burn Them Alls. And it fits nicely into your cost curve of going like play a starter, play Flame Call, grab the Phoenix Flame, Furnace the Phoenix Flame, and then play the Nourishing off of that. And of course, it's a popper. Interestingly though, only one Miraging Metamorph, probably just a space issue, and then we have E-Strikes kind of instead in that slot. Now, one concern that I have here that I'm gonna have with the other builds too, is we look at it, we only have the 5 blues, and then we have 1 sand cover. I am concerned that with the lower blue counts in these lists, we're kind of leaving ourselves open to be weaker to Wizard, specifically Icelander, where it could lead to us being disrupted and then just burned out at the end of the game if we kind of like get behind on a turn cycle or two. It's something to kind of look at moving forward, especially going into Worlds if Icelander's still around. Now next is Nicholas and Guy. Both of them had very similar lists. They're playing the big royal version of the deck with a couple small differences between them. First of all, Guy is playing the extra helmet. Again, I'm assuming this is for Lexi, but I could be wrong. We didn't actually, I believe, see any matchups of him playing other than Dromai mirrors, which kind of makes it hard to ascertain these things from coverage, but well, we might find out later. Where Nicholas is just running the royal helmet in every matchup. Both of them, again, similar idea where they're going Dromai Dust instead of the Ghostly Touch plan. We're not playing Mage Masters or Time Skippers, we're playing the Snapdragons. We don't really need that for generating Ash since we have the gold, so might as well play this as our anti-fatigue plan instead. I think this card's really solid for anti-fatigue. And then in the case of Nicholas, he's playing Cadaverous Contraband for the mirror and as a popper, whereas Guy is playing Thaws. And this is a card that I thought was kind of weird at first, but then the more I thought about it, I saw that this is actually a pretty interesting anti-meta pick. You can play this into Lexi and either discard it to Winter's Bite or block with it at some point, and then it means that if they ever are trying to disrupt your round by just giving you 1 Frostbite, like Lexi flip Winter's Bite or something like that, they kind of have this weird guessing game on whether or not I'm just going to block this turn and just try again next turn, or am I going to just use this to pay for the Frostbite and then play my turn normally? Because a lot of times the Frostbite ends up being worth a full card from you and pricing you into just blocking a lot and really disrupting your turn. And it also makes your tomes much worse if you are playing the tomes in that matchup, which of course Nicholas is because he's only playing the 1 helmet, but he's not playing the Thaws, so I think that could have been a good choice in his deck list specifically. He's also playing Nourishing, so he's up to a lot of poppers in the mirror if he's playing all of them. But I think Thaw is a really heads-up choice for the current metagame. It's the like, how is Lexi trying to counter you? And it's the metagame evolving slowly over time. time, like, okay, if they're gonna go really low on blues, then we'll play more Ice Disruption. Well, if they're playing more Ice Disruption, then maybe Thaw is good. Well, if they're all playing Thaw, maybe we move away from Ice. It's an interesting metagame development that we're seeing there. Now, Guy also is only on 5 blues. It kind of looks weird here because it's down here, but he's on Passing and Dust Up, whereas Nicholas is on 4, one of Warmongers instead. Both of them are on the double remembrance, so they still have that for the anti-fatigue and for the mirror. Now, Warmongers is an interesting one. I think this is the only Warmongers between all of the Dromais that topped. Yeah, it looks like it. Now, anecdotally, I have not really liked Warmongers very much in the deck. I think that, like I was talking with the Frostbite thing, the Lexis have kind of evolved their decks to metagame for Warmongers. It's one of those, like, the more the Warmonger sees play, the worse it gets, because the Lexis will know that that's coming and they'll play around it or deck build around it. But then the less you play it, the more that they'll greed and start playing Tunic and things like that. So it's like, we need some amount of it in the metagame. I don't know what's correct, but I know that I don't really like playing that card very much, but I do still play it sometimes. It's a tough one. It's also good into Azalea, which we have seen is able to beat Dromai. Levi beat Joe Kaiser in the 7th round of Swiss, and then we had, I think it was Nick lost to, I'm spacing on his name, but the guy that won the Calling Taipei on Azalea. So we've got 2 very recent Azalea wins into Dromai, showcasing that Azalea can win that matchup, and that's another case of a lot of the Dromais are skimping on the defensive tools for that matchup. In this case, Nick is playing 3 with the one of Oasis, but we're seeing other people really skimp on them. We got a 1-1 split here in Guy's list, and when you're going Royal without another defensive helmet, you're leaving yourself even more susceptible to that. Kind of like what I was talking about Icelander, giving space for Azalea to come back into the metagame, where Warmongers can be a really good tool to help deal with that. Now, one thing that I think is really interesting too is in Nicholas's list, he's playing the Blaze Headlongs, but we're not playing a lot of the other, like, Emperor style cards like Flame Call Awakening. So a lot of the times this is just going to be vanilla 4 damage, which can be fine. It's just, it seems like we're just throwing a 0 for 4 in the deck and it's not adding a ton of synergy to the deck. I'm not really sure what the decision making on this card is. I'd be interested to hear about that, but that's definitely an interesting choice in the deck. And then we're also seeing all of these, like, Royal big versions of the deck go with both Seeker's Mitts and Wave of Reality, and I really like that choice. It's basically like, if I go first, I'm going to start with gold, and then I can crack the gold, get my ash, do my thing, and then I can have Wave of Reality, kind of making up for that life loss that I'm having from not having a Crown of Providence or something. Whereas if I go second, I can start Seekers and then create an ash on my opponent's turn, and then I don't have to deal with gold shenanigans on my turn going second, and I can save that gold for later, letting me use it for my Tome of Imperial Flame later on in the game, kind of having like a really big turn later on. It gives you a lot of flexibility and choosing how you want to play out your play draw. And Wave of just is an insane card against Lexi. This card is so good. The next interesting thing I want to point out is the number of Burn Them Alls that they're all playing. We see 2 in Guise, 2 in Vors. We've got 3 in both Jacob and in Nicholas's deck. Makes sense for Jacob to be playing 3. He's on the Flame Calls. We need all the 0-cost starters as possible. But we're seeing 2 to 3 in all of their lists, which is interesting coming off of Nick's list where he was only playing 1. I'm wondering if in the case of Nick, his idea was, I'm just going to play the 1 for fatigue, and later on in the game, I've got these metamorphs that are going to come back around, and I'm just going to ask the question to a fatigue player, you want to pop this? I got this Burn Them All in play. It's getting up there in counters. You can either pop this and give me a new Burn Them All and take 7 later, or you can not pop this and just take the damage and take 7 now. Your move. How would you like to play this? Whereas these players all just went with the more standard 2 to 3 in their decks, which I think is pretty reasonable. Burn Them All is also like a really good card in the mirror, where if you're planning on seeing a lot of mirrors, card to have in the deck. One common factor that, though, I've seen between all these lists is it seems like there's a lot of metagame decisions going on within their deck for mirror tech. I think all of these players were making a lot of conscious decisions to try to not sack value in the mirror and have as much edge there as possible. We've got extra poppers in the decks. We've got more hit triggers like Snatch and Contraband and Pursuit of Knowledge. We still see people playing things like Necria and Uvia, even with really low blue counts, making it hard to play, just because how good these are in the mirror. But then we also see these players trying to put big attacks in their deck, letting them clear these big dragons when they hit the table. Because that's when, like, 2 of the worst things that can happen in the mirror is your opponent plays a bunch of Ashwings, and all you have is big dragons, so you just can't clear the Ashwings very efficiently, and they get to table Ashwings. Or they play a dragon with, as Majin Bey would say, a big dumpy, and all you have is Ash Wings. So you just poke it a bunch of times and give them a ton of Ash, and now they don't have to worry about Ash for the rest of the game. Or you just literally can't get it off the board, and they start accruing even more value with their Uvia. So we see a mix of more ways to recur their cards, like Rake the Embers, like Remembrance and Contraband, hit triggers to get value off of clearing dragons, and big attacks to clear the hard-to-clear dragons. I feel like going forward, a lot of these decks are going to kind of be making similar choices, especially going into Worlds. Dromai looks like it's going to be one of the best decks in format going into Worlds, and I think a lot of the decision-making in your deck building is going to be, how can I jam in as many Mirror Tech cards in my deck without sacking value in other matchups? Because you still need to have a game plan into Fatigue, you still need to be able to beat Wizard, and then you got to look at what other aggro decks are in the format and have tools for that matchup. That's it on my thoughts about the deck lists that did well at the calling. Congratulations to all these players on topping, and congratulations to Guy for winning the whole thing. I'm going to be making some more Dromai videos coming up. Like, I want to make a video talking about it, Tome of the Imperial Flame, and like the actual value of this card, because I think a lot of people misunderstand what actually makes Tome good and why it's good and where it's bad. So I'm going to be talking about that coming up soon. If you have any thoughts on these deck lists, I'd love to hear them below. Which one did you guys like the most? Were the card choices that you thought were interesting and were worth talking about? Like one I missed right now was Dust Up. I didn't really talk about that. This is an interesting choice too. This is good in the mirror. Lets you clear a dragon with 2 health or 1 health like an Ashwing or Chromai, and then make your own Ashwing. Good card in the mirror. Dust Up's always an all-star. A lot of times you'll see people instead sometimes play like Ember Mob because it's just big number on card, can clear things like Necria. If you want to see some more Dromai content, I've got a video up here talking about my Nationals deck list if you want to check that out. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get up to 5,000 by the end of the year. That'd be sweet if you guys could help me out on raising those numbers. Gotta watch that number go up, you know, gotta get that dopamine hit of watching shit go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you.